So let me introduce to you Ken. We're going to have a few minutes together, and we're going to have a film, which is on the program as well. Maybe you can't see us too well. Let me stand up here so you can see us there. Peace is at the centerpiece of the UN's charter, at the preamble. And that's one of the main reasons why we are engaged in being here and in the advocacy activities. This is at the core. The question is, how could the United Nations and its members achieve peace? And in the charter, there are references to it, and of course it established the Security Council. But there had to be some implementation means to achieve peace. And this is how it led to the establishment, maybe this one's on too, okay, we'll do it this way. This led to the establishment of UN Peacekeeping, which began in 1948. Well, then there was a question how it could become effective instead of just an ephemeral idea. And initially it was to monitor armistice and prevent the breakout of further conflict. But the mission has grown, and we have a guy here today who exemplifies how the mission has grown and what it's done. So peacekeeping is something also that is central to our advocacy work, and being sure that our government and our country understands what it's about and provides the means to fulfill it. There are now 16 missions around the world. There have been over 70 in the history of the UN. There are 125,000 military, police, and civilian staff doing the peacekeeping and engaged in it. And this last week was the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. So it's very, very timely and appropriate because it is the moment. It is relevant for our advocacy. It's at the core of the UN. So let me tell you a bit about Ken himself, because he is back now by popular demand. I think some of you heard him on the national conference call in August, and he was so good, and there was such a positive reaction that organizers of the conference wanted you to have an opportunity to see him in person and see a brief video about some of his experience, and then we'll have a chance also for questions and answers at the end of this particular session. But Ken is an American who became a civil servant, an international civil servant. He's had 29 years in both local experience in New York City and then national experience in the U.S., and now with the UN for 15 years. He's been involved in legal and policy, as a legal policy advisor, as a political officer, as a director of one of the UN missions in the management of it. He's been in charge of the office in South Sudan, and he is now chief of the UN Peacekeeping Operations Support and Security Section, which is in your program, and he will tell you a little bit about that. But without the kind of work that he has been doing and his unit has been doing, these 125,000 peacekeepers in their mission would not have the security themselves to function. He brings to this a tremendous background as both a student of criminal justice. He has a law degree and an MBA, so he's got a great set of qualifications. And I want to thank him, and I think we should all thank him also for coming down from New York to be with us today on a Sunday. This is the weekend of his first wedding anniversary as well. Yeah, it's a real but he but he celebrated already a couple days ago, so he could have a free weekend with us. So we're now going to turn to his film, and that will serve as sort of the touchstone.
South Sudan descends into civil war. Can anyone?
And we're now going to see the film.
Take the fleeing civilians. Ken Payumo's story in his own words.
The civilians from the area complained, and there was no place for them really to go other than our compound. streaming in. We couldn't control the amount, and of course we couldn't say no to people seeking shelter and help and protection. We didn't ask anybody, are you pro-government or anti-government? So it didn't matter, and we didn't know. We were just there to protect her and show up in our gate. The government took over Wartown from the armed groups. They incurred a lot of losses themselves, and but by the time they got to war, temperatures were very high, and they were very angry. I'm sure they were also in state of shock. The senior government official had landed in the airfield, I greeted the senior government official, and he asked me, are those people in your compound pro or anti-government? And I said, sir, we don't distinguish, we just help whoever shows up. And I said, well, I want to visit later. And I thought that was a great idea, and was more than willing to support in any way I could. Made the arrangements. But he arrived in the afternoon with at least 80 armed soldiers. And when they came to the gate, it was clear that the intentions were not good.
Was anybody like
they wanted to make their way past me and into the compound, and immediately said, you can't come in with your weapons, you can't come in with your uniforms, and you can't come in with your cameras because of respect for the eternally displaced persons. And they refused. This is our country, our government. You don't tell us where to go. And that's when the soldiers started to push past me, and that's when they ordered the gates of the compound closed. It was difficult. Hearing the gates closed was probably the loudest sound that I've ever heard. I found myself on the other side with a military liaison officer and another civilian staff, and that was it. That's when the soldiers had cocked their rifles at me and still insisted to come in. And that's when I really just kept saying no. We had all these people depending on us, depending on the UN inside the compound. Thousands. This was their last refuge. There was nowhere else. This point was not negotiable. At minimum, they would have shot whoever they thought could have been anti-government. They would have perhaps taken people out and arrested them. There's a multitude of things that happened, and none of them were good. But I really didn't think about it so much before, but afterwards I had time to reflect. I pretty much said goodbye to just everything. I didn't know what was going to happen, And just had to make an internal decision what was important. And right then and there, the thousands of people that we were protecting was the most important thing. Then it was back and forth for I couldn't even tell you how long. It could have been a minute, it could have been an hour, but it felt like a long time. After we saw that we weren't budging, and somehow they got less emboldened. I can't say when the pivot time was, when things turned around, but they just, at some stage started to get into their vehicles and leave. And that was almost the opposite of what I thought was going to happen next. And but I'm grateful that that's the way it ended.
This is why we're here. Because the unique things the United Nations can do and why it needs our support, and because there are people like this who have wisdom and experience and courage and values that we can all feel very strongly when we hear this little story. Ken, why don't you come up? I'm really happy to be with this guy. And I'm glad we're all able to be with this guy. Ken, do you want to say anything more about this incident and what it means to you?
Maybe just in context, we were for weeks in the compound, shut off from food and supplies, and we had mortar shells and tank shells coming into the compound, exploding, and they were really tough times. So it was crescendo with this, and inside it was tough, and didn't really see it here, but there were thousands of soldiers in the vicinity since they had just taken over the area. So it wasn't just 80, but they were representing so many others, and just had to take a stand, and it just wouldn't have ended. And just wanted to, again, just lucky to have try to help and be there to help, and really, in many ways, thank you, because this is through and with your support, the people that appreciate what the UN does, what peacekeeping does, and what UN personnel do. I have to say it's not only comforting, but it's a great sign. And seeing all of you here today, and the enthusiasm, and what all of you bring to the table, and what we bring to the table, and what we can do together, it's sensational. And thank you for having applauded me. It's very humbling, and I just hope I can do more and keep preserving that which I've given you now. Thank you.
As you heard in the introduction briefly, Ken has been in a variety of posts. He's been in East Timor, which is another place where there was slaughtering of civilian population and conflicts going on, and a number of other missions. It's also said that the UN gets the toughest places of conflict, not the easy ones or not the ones that can be resolved by others. You want any other experiences in particular that highlight the nature of the UN peacekeeping operations?
Yeah, it's throughout the decades. The operations have really changed. We're no longer in the middle of two parties that disagree, but the environments themselves. Just thinking of the missions that have been deployed to post Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. How does even in that mission environment, how do they work there? Deployed to Afghanistan to see post ISAF. How do we work in that environment? In Mali, where there are extremists, peacekeeping has never been really exposed to that. How do our personnel work in that environment? And when I thought it couldn't get any worse, Ebola, then they deployed it to Liberia. How do we work in that? And it just mounts and mounts and mounts. And we deal with what resources we have, but we're not given much more. So just to say, as time goes on, the job gets more and more difficult. Our personnel out there are in more difficult environments, and so we just have to be nimble and do the best with what we have.
Yeah, we know you get your mandates from the Security Council, and those are all approved by the United States of America, or they wouldn't get through the Security Council. The U.S. would veto it. But you get a mandate, and then you've got to get the groups out there and other people in peacekeeping, and then you've got to make sure those people can survive. So what's it like when you get a mandate and that you confront Ebola or you confront thousands of displaced persons, as well as you're trying to keep the guys who are the rebels or who are the committing atrocities? I mean, how are you guys nimble and able to accomplish all that stuff and adapt to what that mandate is that's given to you in New York?
One particular time when we were given the mandate to establish a mission in Darfur, that was no land, a person's land at all. You had to blaze the way. I mean, I was deployed there, and there was going through different areas to say, we're the UN, we're going to come in here, and we're going to try and help. Now, we have to, in context, many people in places that we go to don't know what the UN is. I mean, many people, in this country or other places don't know what the UN is. So trying to explain, there will be blue helmets and there will be blue flags, and it's not a country invading, but this is people that are trying to help. I mean, it's really difficult. They're not trying to explain this to armed persons. I just remember once, this was in Darfur, just 2 vehicles out there for a couple of months ago again, trying to establish locations where personnel can deploy. And same type of situation, with rebels, and they're pointing their arms. And it was odd, they detected a United States accent. And so like, are you American? And I said, I am. And they said, well, do you know George Bush? I don't know him, but to be right. But that sparked off the discussion. But what I'm saying is that you kind of use all the tools that you have in order to break the path and establish the mission. Our personnel go to really tough, very tough locations, and when you get the mandate, then you really have nothing there. It usually takes a few months for the mission to establish, and this has become difficult. I mean, we've done this. I've done this specifically again in Darfur, Central African Republic, in Haiti when we started that mission, and again, you just go out there and do the best you can.
Yeah. What about working with other parts of the UN system and other international groups, international NGOs? I mean, you're obviously got a special role, a unique role, but when you're dealing with displaced persons, the kind of people who are in your camp in South Sudan, how does that collaboration work, and what are some examples? Because these are all the frontline people who are told go out and help the situation.
Indeed, what we do is enable the environment, or the actors in the environment to work. So whether it's agencies, funds, and programs, whether it's implementing partners with INGOs, it's to ensure that again they're able to deploy there and to really do their work. And that doesn't happen on its own. I mean, as you know, host governments are responsible for UN personnel primarily, but many times they don't have the capacity to actually do this. So who does it eventually come to? It comes to us. I mean, even in my unit. So my unit is responsible for the security for all the peacekeeping missions, those under the UN security management system. So essentially, all the civilian personnel, the unarmed military and police, and also that includes the agencies, funds, and programs.
Yeah, could you tell us a few things about some of the successful UN peacekeeping missions? Because there's so much criticism that we hear on Capitol Hill and at home and from people who don't understand, and we know it's the toughest job there can be because you get the worst assignments. But give us some examples.
Well, East Timor was one of them, but you have to say I've been extremely fortunate in the opportunities that I've been given in the organization. Frank, my first experience was in East Timor, a brand new country, newest country on earth. And then I was given a chance again in South Sudan, the newest country on earth. So again, been extremely lucky. And East Timor, again, there was nothing, no government, and we were able to influence the development, not only the government, but I was specifically looking at growing their police service. And the influence you have at the very beginning, I mean, it's so key. I remember getting the first bunch of recruits in, and I don't know where they got these T-shirts, but on it says, "Don't run, or you only die tired." Wow, what happened? But see, at the very onset, if we weren't there, right? If we, meaning this this organization right, we're going to change those T-shirts, and we're going to be human rights and what it means to be a good police service. It's again, that country wouldn't be the same. I just think because of a lot of what we've done. Although what I'm saying is that all the effort that we put into, particularly development and creating an environment that allows the establishment of government entities and ensuring that they're able to go forward. I mean, that's really the elements of success.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned already the importance of the U.S. government support and funding of peacekeeping. I mean, there's a mandate given, and what enables it to succeed. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? I mean, because sometimes you're told go out and do something, and you don't have the means to do it, or it takes, as you said, a while to establish the mission because some countries got to offer the peacekeepers who will be deployed as well as have the resources to succeed. How about that and the link between the availability of resources to empower you to do it and the mandate and the crisis that's facing you?
That's the important thing. Well, the Security Council mandates, this is now Secretariat, now please move forward and implement. That, sure we can deploy, but we do need not only equipment, but the personnel, I mean, the right people in the right places, and how do you get them there, and how do they continue to work in these places, only comes with resources. And it's almost do more with less, but it's how can you do the best job possible under those circumstances. So we do the best we can, but just keeping up with the mandates that are given. I mean, if you just look at more recent mandates, what they call almost Christmas tree, because it's decorated with everything, and expecting the A mission or UN personnel to evolve to this, it's tough. We absolutely can't do it, but again, with the resources given, I think we can maybe do even a better job with more.
Okay, it's an extraordinary story. We have time for some questions. I'm sure we haven't exhausted them. There's one back there. Let's take 2 or 3 questions if there are, and don't hesitate, and then Ken will answer them in order, or some order.
Thanks so much for the presentation. Richard Ravery over in East South Sudan.
Yeah, could you introduce yourself and what chapter you're from? Thank you.
Watchers from the Milwaukee, Wisconsin chapter.
Thank you.
First, I wonder, just in specific about South Sudan and pro and anti-government is the best way to characterize it. But then also, there was mention of some of the peacekeeping missions that were sort of like Mission Impossible, places like Srebrenica, maybe in Rwanda. Can you say in South Sudan, was there some different strategy or tactics that you used that turned out to be successful, or how did it change?
I'm not saying there was something spectacularly different, but because overnight, what was looking to be a more a protection mission, looking at development, the country just its threat profile raised instantly, and how did we adapt? And so there wasn't a lot of force to deploy around the country. Just as an example, there was what had marched past the compound, state coordinator in charge, what had marched past the compound were probably 8,000 plus troops, and that was more than we had peacekeepers in the whole country. So what the best thing we could do is make our compounds, right, kind of protection of civilian locations, and this was key. So the strategy, since this happened overnight, because really I had organized a compound for maybe 200-300 persons in case this type of event happened, not expecting to be thousands, and so consolidate our resources, protect where we could, and I think that was part of the successful element, is that rather than scatter, ensure that people knew where to go, ensure that once they were there, we did the best we can to protect them, and I think that really helped.
Okay. Question here, and then behind you after that, and then I see that one over there.
Thank you very much. Steve Mosley from the NCA chapter here in the Washington area. As you know, there's now a special high-level commission headed by the former president of East Timor. I guess it's supposed to report in the fall on where some of the future directions should be going for the UN on peacekeeping and I hope peace building as well as peacekeeping. Could you comment about what your hopes and expectations would be from that high-level commission? I know you can't speak on their behalf, but what are your needs and your hopes that would come out of this process of reviewing and where the future could go? That will be helpful to you.
No, thanks. I mean, really, the last big report, if I can say, with the Payumo report, I mean, really established a bit of a path. But now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the environments that we operate in have changed. And I think what's important is to at least acknowledge that in a big way. Because once you acknowledge that, then there's an open discussion in what's required now to actually operate in there. And that has to be really put down institutionally now kind of recognized. And I think that would really be the most important findings, if I can say it. Maybe come in little recommendations, but I think as a chapeau, if they come out with that, that would be a real success.
Okay. The lady behind, tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Veronica Doolin from the Georgetown chapter. I was just wondering, we, as UNA, do a lot of advocacy on the Hill, and since we have this opportunity to speak to you, we do a lot of advocacy about peacekeeping, and a lot of what we focus on is we don't spend a lot of money on it, or it's a really good program, but since we have this opportunity, I was wondering if there was anything that you would advise us on to speak about in regards to the peacekeeping program, so that we can get you more support at Congress.
Well, it's such a big question, but I mean, personally, this is just myself. I mean, when I was a New York City cop, I was 20 years old, and I remember showing up to one of my first jobs in call, and the weight instantly felt that it's you. I mean, you are not responsible for this. Nobody else is going to show up. If they do, it's just more of you, so this is your responsibility. And this is kind of the immense weight I felt and feel in the field. When you're speaking or working with the population, it's just you, right? And there's nobody else that's coming, particularly in the environments that missions are in. And it's I think that's something that kind of has to be underscored. How do personnel there now operate safely? How do personnel there now operate with the right resources? And that's it. There is no cavalry, if I can say, of development people coming. There is no other cavalry. It's a couple of civil affairs officers, a couple of humanitarians, and that's it. So when people speak generically, UN, what it boils down to is I kind of like the video. It's just really a couple of people trying to help. And I think that really has to be underscored if you could.
And they need money to do it. And Congress has a budget. There's a question over there. Thanks.
My name is Barry Simon, the Southern California Division in the Los Angeles and Beverly Hills chapters. And thank you. My question was part of a comment and a question. So the comment is that there's a real lack of, I find, in the press in the U.S., of acknowledgement of the service of the peacekeepers. And there's been, I don't know how many peacekeepers that have been lost in various actions and situations in the areas that you've served and others. And I just want to thank you on behalf of us. Thank you and the peacekeepers for the lives you're giving for the possibility of a world that works for everyone. So thank you for that. And my question is, what is the U.S. role in the world of peacekeeping missions?
That's as a permanent member of the Security Council, I mean, crafting the mandate itself they're literally at the precipice of our mandate. So that's really key. And the second thing is the biggest role is making sure that mandate is able to be not only resourced, but we're able to do it. And it's that kind of advocacy that really helps. I mean, and afterwards, you have to go through these what's called ACBQ and then the fifth committee. These are budgetary committees that move forward. And it's really been one, moving the mandates so that forward, so that they're able to be of assistance. And second, in order to advocate around, other member states to support the resources in order to make those mandates happen.
Do you want to mention something about troops and equipment and supplies and reconnaissance and surveillance and stuff like that, whether they play a role?
Well, if you heard this, but there was if I can put it in a nutshell, so that our personnel out there, to ensure that our personnel out there are technologically advanced enough to be able to support we call it reconnaissance and there is a movement now looking at technology and to move that into peacekeeping. I mean, things simple as surveillance balloons, things that are kind of normal, if I can say, with many different nations' forces, but still have to be kind of introduced into the missions. And so really, that's part of the language that enables us.
But are there any of the U.S. troops on the ground, or are they from other countries? I think that's important.
Yeah. No, there are no U.S. troops per se. There are a few what we call military observers or military liaison officers, but again, small number, but their presence is important.
Okay, there was a question somewhere in the back there. And we have time for a couple more questions.
Yes, good morning. Tita Banks with the Houston chapter and the National Steering Committee, and also the Consul General for Liberia. So I am here to say personally thank you on behalf of the Embassy of Liberia, because not only has the UN been there through the waves of civil war, then you turned around and went back to Liberia during Ebola when all other organizations pretty much abandoned us. So we certainly want to say thank you. How do you see, in terms of as we're moving forward with the Sustainable Development Goals, how do you see the UNA assisting the peacekeepers?
See, this is before mandates were a little more straightforward. Again, between two parties that disagree. Now the missions are so complex, and personnel are asked to do so many different things, and just the development part of it really has to be underscored. I mean, the missions, particularly integrated ones, have the more political side and then the more humanitarian development side. Really, the advocacy of that and the strategy for that really has to come out, because agency funds programs were there before the mission and they'll be there afterwards, and it's really kind of that with this big shot of resource while the mission is there. How does that impact so that when the mission leaves eventually, that the agency-funded programs and the government can move forward on its own. So it's really just putting together that entire package. And who supports agency-funded programs? It's donors. And that's where I think kind of that partnership has to be really championed.
Okay, last question, and then we're going to move on over there.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Kinney. I'm with the Birmingham, Alabama chapter. I also work with the State Department student ambassadors who are here from other countries in the Yes and Flex programs, where we're training young people to be leaders for volunteerism and community service. And I'm wondering what the people that you're actually working with, you're together directly with the people. Do you have a feeling that the people are feeling empowered or dependent on your need? Are you feeling any kind of generational change that we were talking about as far as communications now that I'm always impressed with students that we get, that I have students who come from areas where they don't have water, but they have cell phones. And so they know what's going on in the world. And they want to create change, and they're applying for these programs. But I'm wondering if you, as a person with direct contact with those people, if you're seeing any generational change with those people, or any feeling that they want to empower themselves and take a greater part in the peacekeeping mission, or do you have a feeling that they're still totally dependent on us for help?
No matter where, I think the last 15 or so years have really changed. I mean, technology itself. I remember the floppy disks. The first mission I was in, you had to get online and sign up for each floppy disk, right? And again, with mobile phones and everything else, it has, moved newer generations, or the generation that's coming up. I mean, making them a bit more knowledgeable in peacekeeping, not only peacekeeping, but I'm saying world events. And that really directly impacts, on all levels. So now, and to say literally on the ground, I remember somebody coming from a village where I don't know where it was, but it was very remote, coming to the compound and saying they saw this educational program in, I think it was Idaho, and would it be possible to help support them go there and go through the program? And I'm just giving that as an anecdote, how from very remote places, the message gets through, advocacy is made, and really it's a big support. I mean, directly for the UN, it's there. I mean, even say the video that was made now, that in reaching out. I mean, that's something that hadn't really been done before, and we're lucky to be doing that. I don't know if that specifically answers, but just to say, in a big sense, yes. I mean, there has been a change.
Ken, is there anything you have a question? We do have time for one more. Go ahead.
James Millar from the Thank you. James Millar from the newly founded Michigan State University chapter. Thank you. Though peacekeeping is a major part of what the UN does, and in a lot of places, internally displaced peoples and refugees have nowhere else to turn to. And that's an incredible part of what the UN does, and it needs to be commended. But what about peacemaking operations? Is there any role that the UN has in conflict resolution, peacemaking?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost step one in trying to restore order and also trying to bring parties together. I mean, we were speaking about this kind of recently. I mean, Burundi, we had a peacekeeping operation before, a political mission, and now it's fallen again into some turmoil in the last weeks. And what's the first thing in diplomacy and conflict prevention, and that's the peace building part. Hopefully, prevents the peacekeeping part. And I know some resource and a lot more have gone to it over the years, but that's key. And really, as you all know, once peacekeeping mission is established, things have gone pretty bad. And really, I know that good offices that are established before that happens sometimes do well, and it doesn't make the headlines because they've done so well. And really, that's kind of more quiet battle that happens. It's still going on in Yemen, it's still going on in Syria, trying to kind of stem flows of something that's already gone badly, but it goes forward. So, peace building not only has a role, but it's step one.
Shanti? One more now with her three hands up. Okay, that one in the back. Sorry, everybody.
My name is Tatiana Anderson. I'm one of the people who
Oh.
years ago.
Fantastic.
Okay. I have a question. I have a first comment. I think it is time, and I don't know how we can do it, but I'm going to broach it with you here and with everybody, that we used to have a television program in my generation called Mission Impossible. And I think it's time for the world to learn about UN peacekeeping, peacemaking operations through another television show, and maybe all of us can find ways to get to Hollywood or whatever to create a new show called Mission Impossible Today, which is a different thing. So that's my big comment. And my question is, because I'm trying to look at the latest figures, do you have the figures of how much is being allocated to peacekeeping operations these days, and how much does that compare to the military operations, not in percentage, but in real money terms? Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll be apologies for this, but the 15-16 I don't have with me, but I just know that at least a few years ago that the New York City Police Department's budget was pretty much in line with the peacekeeping budget. And it's, in fact, even the Tokyo Fire Department was also kind of in line with it. And to be frank, it's quite amazing. You know, it really is, considering the amount of people in the span of locations and the focus that peacekeeping has to, and other missions have to deal with. It is quite an amazing job. So, I mean, suffice saying, this has to be also looked up, but in New York City, 5 boroughs, 8 million plus so people, and peacekeeping millions and millions of people in the very desperate desolate locations being looked after. So if I can just say that, the comparison is almost isn't there.
Okay, I know there are more hands going up. You'll have to buttonhole them over a coffee or something like that as we move to the next session. But look, let's put this in perspective. When the chips are down, the World Food Program goes in there. We could have had a World Food Program guy here, or a gal. UNICEF goes in. High Commission for Refugees goes in. The crises are all over the world, and the UN member states have fortunately said, we got to do something about it, starting with the peacekeeping, which came right out of the, when the gates were opened in 1945, that was the mandate everybody had to respond to. But the versatility and the flexibility and the need to get out there and act is what we're hearing about today. And the film was fantastic in his own words. And then these questions, all of you have contributed to our understanding of how the success is a function of people, of resources, finances as well. But without the people, it ain't going to happen. So this is a great example. I will never having talked to Ken on the phone and then met him now, I will never have the same opinion of a New York City cop. What they do and what they can do. I will never have the same understanding and appreciation, even though I served in the UN for 31 years in 8 developing countries. I'll never have the same impression and feeling about what it means to be a peacekeeper and what they've got to contend with those different circumstances in every single mission. And obviously, when we go to the Capitol Hill and we can say, by the way, senior staffer who's advising Senator Smith, did you know that this budget that you're quibbling about is the equivalent of the size of the New York City police force? That puts things in perspective. It's not going to break the national debt, or it's not going to contribute to the national debt if we can generate more understanding and support for the kind of things that Ken has been doing. Now, Barry mentioned Thank a Peacekeeper. How many of you have participated in the Thank a Peacekeeper effort? There you go. This is a campaign that the UN Foundation and UNA have been supporting, is to thank guys like him and the other 125,000 around the world and the people in headquarters staff who are doing this kind of stuff. I will never have the same feeling and appreciation for what it means to thank a peacekeeper. So would you please join me in thanking, once again, this great peacekeeper.